So on the pH scale, we know that pure water has a pH of 7, and that's a neutral solution, and it's because the concentration of hydrogen ion is exactly equal to the concentration of hydroxide ion. All of these that are acidic solutions are less than pH 7, and all of these that are greater than 7 are basic solutions. And so one thing we can see is that just outside of water, I mentioned milk, but also rain and acid rain. These are both on the acidic side. So rain is naturally acidic. And this is about pH 5 to 6. And that's natural. And so it's not acid rain. Acid rain is even lower pH. It's a pH less than 5. And that's because there's more hydrogen ions. Okay, why are there more hydrogen ions in rain and acid rain? We'll get to that, but let's also talk about blood and seawater. So I had already mentioned that those are slightly basic. So blood is about pH 7.4, and ocean water or seawater is about pH 8.2. Okay, so that's more than 7, and what that means is that there's less hydrogen ions in the basic solutions, the blood and the seawater. Why? So the reason why ocean water or seawater and blood have a slightly basic pH greater than 7 is due to these three species. So there's the carbonate ion, the bicarbonate ion, and carbonic acid. The carbonate ion you might have heard of in Tums, which is calcium carbonate. Okay, and calcium carbonate is also a major component of shells in like the shell of a snail or the shell of a lobster, and also coral. So the bicarbonate ion you might have heard of from sodium bicarbonate, which is the chemical name of baking soda. And then carbonic acid you may have heard of fizz in soda. So if you have fizzy soda, fizzy water, it's because of carbonic acid. Those are the bubbles. These are naturally present in our blood and in our oceans. They've been since the evolution of the human body and since the evolution of oceans on Earth. So for millions of years, the ocean has been maintained at a slightly basic pH of 8.2 because these ions are present in the ocean. So how these ions are similar is that they all have a carbon and 3 oxygens. So here's a carbon and 3 oxygens. Here's a carbon and 3 oxygens. Here's a carbon and 3 oxygens. So you can see this is the trigonal planar shape. So what's different about these is there's a hydrogen that's added, and this is one hydrogen. Adding a second hydrogen would add this second hydrogen there. So this can also the other direction and remove hydrogens. So removing hydrogens would be taking off one of those hydrogens and leaving only one hydrogen, or removing that one hydrogen and having 0 hydrogens. So this is a buffer system that allows for hydrogens to increase or decrease. And so it allows for incorporating hydrogen ions, and what's important in our blood is when you use your muscles, you generate lactic acid that goes into your blood. And so your blood can take up that acid, taking up the hydrogen ions that are generated by the carbonic acid in the blood forming bicarbonate ion or carbonate ion. And there's not just one molecule, but there's millions of these molecules in your blood that allow for uptake and absorbing some acid. These 3 compounds have maintained the ocean pH to be slightly basic until humans came along and started pumping a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So this is from factories and from transportation sources and from generating electricity from coal-fired power plants or natural gas power plants. And so this is the industrial era that has brought atmospheric carbon dioxide levels up to 400 parts per million. So what happens to the carbon dioxide gas is it doesn't just stay in the atmosphere. It eventually is dissolved into the ocean, and this is because water can dissolve so many things. So water is the universal solvent, even affecting all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so what you have is carbon dioxide that was a gas, okay, that was a gas is then carbon dioxide that is now dissolved, and that when it's dissolved in the water is aqueous. That carbon dioxide reacts with the water and forms H2CO3. We've seen that before. This is carbonic acid. So this is naturally present already in the ocean, and this just adds to the carbonic acid already there. Well, what's more important is that carbonic acid is a weak acid. And what weak acids do is they decompose. This is a double-headed arrow, and they break into the ions. So you get some hydrogen ion, and you get this bicarbonate ion. This bicarbonate ion, HCO3-, this adds to the bicarbonate that's already present in the ocean and doesn't affect that, but what is affected is this hydrogen. So this hydrogen is additional hydrogen. So this is added H plus in the ocean, and there's about 26% more since the industrial era. So this is the problem of ocean acidification. This is lowering the pH to about 8.1, and which is from 8.2 down to 8.1 is going in the direction of becoming more acidic, okay, because it's going in the acid range. But it doesn't mean that the ocean acidification does not mean that the oceans are becoming an acid. So oceans are still basic. Okay, the ocean still will have the basic pH, which right now is down to 8.1. But just the fact that humans have put this much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and affected the oceans, all the oceans, to bring down the pH, well, that's an anthropogenic effect. And so this is just one name, though, that is not actually telling the real problem. So the real problem of ocean acidification is not that the ocean is turning to a different pH, but this is the bigger issue, is that all those extra hydrogen ions have to be taken up. And so this is coral reefs and shells of marine life that contain carbonate ion with calcium carbonate in them. We looked at that in the last slide. The calcium carbonate breaks apart into the ions, and that carbonate ion will take up the excess hydrogen. So the carbonate ion, and so the carbonate kind of acts like a sponge. It doesn't mean to do that, but like anything around, it's just a system that's trying to be in balance. And so taking up all this added hydrogen is what this causes. It's causing the coral and the shells to actually decompose, because you can see the coral has to break down into the ions in order to form the carbonate to take up the hydrogen. So the shells of marine life and the skeletons, the basis, the foundations of coral reefs are dissolving because of all this excess hydrogen that we've added to the ocean from the carbon dioxide that we've added from our processes of electricity and transportation and factories that make stuff.